Sorry, my mom's over there. She's now recording me. You're now recording me or taking pictures of me or something. So, what?
Your face.
I'll have to insert that picture in here. So, I'm going to be talking about, as y'all can tell from the title, the best books that I read this year in 2019. And I actually had a pretty good year, even though I only read 50 books, but a lot of those books were actually good. So we're gonna talk about them. 12 books that I felt were good enough to appear in this video. I also just filmed my worst of the year. I thought I'd put on my Winnie the Pooh onesie that I got for Christmas this year. I thought I'd put it on because I like it so much and it is so cute and fuzzy and soft. I'm gonna wear this. Let's go ahead and get started. I don't even know what I'm gonna talk about first, so I think I'm just gonna grab from the pile. So I'm gonna first talk about Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This book I just read literally last week. It was so good, you guys. So I'm actually so sad that it took me so long to read this because it's been on my TBR for a very long time and I literally just read this last week and I wish that I wouldn't have waited so long, but I did. Then my mama and I watched the movie because she read this with me, and I actually listened to the audiobook, which was really, really good, by the way. I did read along as I went. I don't know, this book just made me so happy, but it was all... My dog just jumped on the bed by himself. You guys don't know how much of a big deal that is. Oh my god, he's tearing up my books. But anyways, this book, the audiobook, all of it was so good. It was so funny, and it was like just something that warmed my heart when I read it. I do wish that, like I said, that I'd read this sooner. It just was like, I don't know, there was so much drama, but it was so funny to watch. And even though I'd get so pissed off during this, it was still so amazing. And it was so nice to learn about different cultures around the world. So this is obviously based in China. Because of that, you learn about so many things about their culture, the food, and like just certain traditions that they have around the holidays. It was just something fascinating. I always love learning about different cultures as I'm reading, so this just hit all the marks that I wanted it to. It was diverse, it was educational, also just fucking downright entertaining. If you haven't read this, read it. It's amazing. Like I said, kicking myself in my little Winnie the Pooh ass for not reading this sooner. But the next book that I want to talk about is My Lovely Wife by Samantha Downing. That's a big turn from reading this funny, loving, amazing, romantic book to talking about this murder mystery thriller. Like, I guess this isn't a mystery. This is just very thrilling and twisted and dark. My Lovely Wife is about a husband and wife who are completely normal in every shape, way, and form for the most part, except for the fact that they like to kill people in their spare time. So interesting, right? Right. It was downright interesting and amazing and twisted and dark and just the perfect amount of nasty and gore. It was perfect. I strongly recommend people read this book. I don't know, it was just something so unnerving about a perfectly normal couple that has neighbors and friends, and they do normal things like with their kids and all, and for them to be murderers and like enjoy that activity and get aroused by it, and like so fucking weird but so perfect. And this was a book that the twist there, because there were some twists in it, even though you know who the murderers are, there were twists in it, even though I saw a lot of them coming. This was one of those books where I didn't mind that I saw the twist coming because the execution was so good. And a lot of the times, for me to rate a thriller high, it has to be thrilling, or it has to be like shocking. Not obviously it has to be thrilling, but it has to have some sort of shock element to it that makes me go, holy fuck, I did not know that was coming. Like last year, my favorite book of the year was Behind Her Eyes by Sarah Pinborough. The ending of that book, I did not see coming, and it was amazing and shocking and great. But this was one of those books that didn't have that factor to it. It was not a shocking story, but the execution was so great and it kept me on my toes the whole time. Even though, like I said, I knew what was gonna happen, I still was dying to read it. to know how the author was going to reveal the information. So I did actually debate with this rating when I finished reading it, because at first I was like, do I want to give it a 4? And then as I kept reflecting on it, it was a 5. And it was one of my favorite books that I've read this year. It was just amazing, and I love the cover, like how the mom's like reflection is in the knife. I do recommend this if you like some twisted dark shit like I do. It was amazing. And the next book I'm going to talk about, which is once again completely opposite of what I was just talking about, but that is We Are Okay by Nina LaCour. You guys, this book absolutely ripped my heart into pieces. It's a book that was actually pretty popular on BookTube, I think like in maybe the end of 2017, beginning of 2018. It's a very short contemporary, and I don't know why it took me so long to read it, considering it took me just a couple hours to get through it. I read this during the reading rush, and oh my god, it was so good. I cried so much when I read this. Then on top of that, I'm pretty sure that when I was talking about it in my video, I cried a shit ton. It made me very emotional, but it deals a lot with grief. And, you know, she loses a loved one, she loses a relative, and it's very hard on her, and she's going through the grieving process. It was just a lot for her, and it was just so heart-wrenching. She also has her best friend come back to her college to visit her for a little bit. It's kind of awkward at first because it just was. They haven't talked for a while. The main character is queer, so there is LGBTQ plus rep in this. I recommend this to anybody, especially if you're going through something like grieving a lost or you know, a loved one. Read this. It really, really touched me because I have lost so many people in my life. I have literally lost in my lifetime 16 relatives or friends, and I've gone to all of their funerals, and it has been heart-wrenching to lose so many loved ones, because when I was younger I had a lot of great-grandparents or grandparents who were older and they just passed away. And then I had some unexpected relatives that were fairly young. Like I had a relative who died in a motorcycle accident, and then I had a friend who died in a car accident in high school. Like so many crazy experiences regarding death. That is something that I know all too well, and that scares me. I'm very obsessed with death. It's just crazy like how many people we've lost in our lives. And like my mama's daddy died when she was really, really young. She was 6, and so my mama almost died when I was 6. My brother has diabetic seizures where I've had to revive him. My mom and I, he literally stops breathing and goes blue. It just seems like it has always surrounded my whole life and my whole existence. So reading this was something just really touched me, and it just talks so much about grieving and what it feels like to lose somebody you love, and all of the steps that you go through. Like they always say there's 5 stages to grieving, like, you know, the denial, the anger, depression, acceptance, and then there's bargaining. All of that actually does happen when you are losing somebody. It really, really, all of that is very true, and it goes through all of those 5 stages in this book, and how relatable it was crazy to me, and it just really, really touched me. So yeah, Mama has read this. It is beautiful, by the way. It is such a lyrically beautiful book. Like I love books that are lyrical in their writing. Nina LaCour is a very gifted writer, and I want to read more by her. So obviously all of these books are 5 stars. So yeah, just if you get a chance to read this, read it. It doesn't take long at all, and you will not regret it. I don't think you will. So the next book that I'm going to talk about is Fix Her Up by Tessa Bailey. A lot of people did not like this book, and I do not understand that, but okay, well, I understand it. That's a lie. I do understand it, because when I hear people talk about why they don't like it, I understand where they're coming from. I just did not feel those things when I was reading this. I've actually read this a couple times this year. My mom is whispering to my dog about something.
He stinks. I'm telling him he needs a bath.
My mom is so distracting. This book, okay, you gotta stop. Stop talking shit!
No, he does not want to take a bath.
So this book was amazing. I loved this book. It was just perfect. I liked the romance. I loved the guy. I loved Georgie. The guy's name I think is, Travis. I was gonna say Tom, and I was like, no, it's not Tom. So Travis is the man's name. I think he is a former baseball star, and
Former, not formal.
What the? Former baseball star. He basically gets injured, and he has to stop playing baseball, and he's super, super depressed. So then he has his best friend's sister, Georgie, come in to check on him. She's known him since they were super, super little. Georgie is literally a clown for a living. Like, she dresses up as a clown and goes to parties and entertains children. Her family just doesn't take her seriously, and so she has issues with them. She basically helps him get through it. They end up falling in love, and it's my favorite trope. The guy falling in love with his best friend's sister. That is my favorite trope of all time. All of my favorite romance novels, like Beautiful Blair by Christina Lauren, Fix Her Up, those are my favorites because it is a man falling in love with his best friend's younger sister, who he didn't view as like anything but a kid when they were younger, and then like they grow up into these beautiful women and they fall in love, and it's just amazing. And the woman is generally always like has a crush on them during their younger years, but my favorite trope of all time. This did not disappoint me. It was so funny. Like, I literally laughed so hard in this book. It was so funny. Georgie is hilarious. Love her to death. And Travis is just like, I don't know. I like the macho man type in books. Like, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. I don't think that all men should be like that under any circumstances, but I do like that. That's just kind of my thing, but I'm just obsessed with this, and I highly recommend it because it was fucking amazing. So yeah, the next one that I want to talk about, and this is the last of the books that aren't thrillers, this is the Dream Thieves by Maggie Stiefvater. So I read the whole Raven cycle this year. Actually, it was this summer. I read the first book, The Raven Boys, back in February of 2018, and then it took me until the summer to continue. So it's been like, had been like a year and a half since I had picked this up. Guys, this was so good. This is my favorite one out of all of them. It was just like, I don't know, I think it was because it talked more about Ronan, who is actually my favorite one out of all of them. I just love him, and I feel like his character development was amazing, and I think Maggie Stiefvater does really, really good character driven stories, because like the plot, like I cared about it, but I cared more about them than I did the plot. Like, I wasn't sitting here like super like interested in what they were searching for. I was more interested in how their lives turned out and like their relationships and the problems that they were facing. I just absolutely loved the series in general. Like, I just thought it was a great series, but The Dream Thieves is definitely the winner for me. It was just a great book. It made me the happiest, and yeah, I mean, it was so good that I literally read the last 2 books. Like, this made me want to finish the series because this hooked me more than the first one did. I was hooked after this one. Like, I was committed after this book because like it just made me more attached to the characters than what I already was. But yeah, it was great. Strongly recommend the Raven Boys cycle. It's amazing. You will not regret it, or I don't think you will, but the rest are thrillers, mysteries, because that's basically all I read this year. This is another book that I read very recently, so I'm glad that I waited until like December 29th to film all of this, because I actually ended up reading some of my favorite books last week. So this one is Sadie by Courtney Summers. This is another book that I regret waiting so long to read. This book, I don't want to say it was like enjoyable and great, because it's not enjoyable. Obviously, if anybody knows what this story is, it's about this woman named Sadie whose younger sister Maddie goes missing, and then they find her dead. Sadie disappears, and basically she's looking for the person responsible for hurting her sister. There's a lot of pedophilia in this. It's a lot about men who rape, molest, and harm children or end up murdering them. I just thought this book was also very realistic. I don't want to get into like the ending. A lot of people aren't satisfied with the ending, but I was actually satisfied in the sense that I thought it was appropriate. That's all I'm really gonna say about it. I feel like if anybody has read this, they'll know what I'm talking about. But I actually listened to the audiobook. I followed along. Sometimes I would just listen to the podcast part of the audiobook and then like physically read Sadie's narrative, because it goes from this podcast by somebody named Wes McCrae podcast, basically following her footsteps, and then you have Sadie's point of view but Wes McCrae is always a couple steps behind Sadie, trying to figure out what happened to Sadie, why she disappeared. He's never right on track with her. He's always figuring out stuff that she did like days later, which is unfortunate because maybe if they were right on schedule with her, they could have like helped her with this process, but you know, she wanted to do it alone. This book was incredibly sad, and I feel like it's something that a lot of people need to read. I feel like it is a realistic version of what happens when children get kidnapped. I just think that but it's not gory and like too detailed. It's not disgusting, and it's not something that I think is going to brutally traumatize young adults. I don't think it will anyways, considering what I read and watched when I was younger, like when I was 14, 15, reading about this topic or watching movies about this topic. It was a lot more brutal and just gory more than this. This has a way of keeping it very realistic, but also at the same time not being too gory with their details, if that makes any sense. I hope I'm making sense. This is such an important book and I loved it. It really, really shows like the bond of sisterhood, the shit that young women have to go through a lot of the times, and you know, talking about assault and everything. And I have a really hard time reading about books like this. I have been assaulted before. I have been molested, harassed. I have not been raped, knock on wood. I hope that never happens, but I have been assaulted, all of those things, and it is absolutely so traumatizing. And every single woman I know has a story regarding sexual assault, sexual harassment, rape. So every woman I know has a story, and more than likely has more than one story. So it's really sad, and it just shows what young women have to go through, adult women have to go through. It's just, I think it's a very important book to read. So I do strongly recommend this one, but it was one of my best ones that I've read this year. So the next book that I'm going to talk about, what are you doing?
Giving the dog a bath. I go this way.
Oh my
He's
God.
not gonna be happy.
Oh, hello. I know, it's okay. You gotta take a bath.
I can't get out.
So the next book that I'm going to talk about is Emma in the Knot by Wendy Walker. I fucking love this book. If y'all have not read this, pick it up and read it ASAP. Like, it was so good. I don't know, and it covers one of the topics that I've really been interested in lately, which is narcissistic personality disorder. There is a character in this book that most definitely has that, and I just thought it was so fascinating to read about. Also, just the plot and the ending, all of it is fantastic, and I cannot recommend this book enough. It is so good, and it's short. Like, it's an easy read. It was just fan-fucking-tastic. It is about a 15-year-old girl named Cass and her 17-year-old sister Emma. They both disappear, but then, 3 years later, Cass returns home without Emma. So she comes back without Emma, and they're all trying to figure out what happened. It's fucking great. Please read it if you haven't. It's amazing. Obsessed with it. Like, 5 out of 5 stars. If I could give it 100 out of 100 stars, I would. It was that good. Now, the next book I'm going to talk about is If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio. Y'all, this book was amazing, and I was really afraid I wouldn't like it, and it's because of the fact that there's actually a lot of Shakespeare references in this, and I am not a fan of Shakespeare. I'm just trying to fucking read, and my dog's going crazy. Or film. Okay. Fuck! My dog hates baths. He's so irritating. Like, oh my God. So, If We Were Villains, like I said, I wasn't sure I would like it because I do not like Shakespeare. I just don't like him. I don't like his books. If you do like him, that is obviously more than okay. I was really afraid to read this because I thought I wouldn't understand a lot of it, and I thought that I would get bored. I was not bored at all. This book was so good. Like, this is one of my favorite thrillers that I've ever read, ever. It is the most unique thriller that I've ever read. There's 7 people, so they're in college. Oliver is one of the 7 people, and he gets released from jail after like 10 years of being there. The detective who was on his case, Detective Colborn, decides that he's going to talk with Oliver once he gets released from prison. It basically goes like this. These 7 young people that were in college were all in this play. They were competing for roles every single day, like in their last year of college. These rivalries and everything that they have had all these years in college with each other turns violent and dangerous and bad. Basically, they all have to stick together because something bad happens, and they all have to convince the police that they're innocent and that they had nothing to do with it. So if that interests you at all, I'm not good at summarizing books like this. I'm not. If I could write a paper, I would be perfect, but for some reason speaking about it, I'm not good at. So like I said, this was amazing. Strongly recommended. It was fucking great. So, and then I have 4 more and then we're done, I promise. I'm sorry this taking so long. The next book that I want to talk about is Before She Knew Him by Peter Swanson. Peter Swanson, man, if you have not read his books, read them now. He is so fucking amazing at writing thrillers. Like, oh my god, he's so good. I loved this book, and I read The Kind Worth Killing last year, and I actually like this one better. This book is about a girl named Henrietta. Her and her husband Lloyd move into a new house in this suburban area. Basically, they move because they're trying to get away from their old neighborhood where somebody was murdered, and she had been following the murder, the investigation, the trial, everything, and it went unsolved. She has bipolar disorder, and she basically just became obsessed with this case. So then when she moves into this neighborhood, she goes to talk with her new neighbors across the street. She sees an object in her new neighbor's home, and these neighbors, the husband's name is Matthew, I can't recall the wife's name, but she basically finds something that relates to the killing that she was so obsessed with in Matthew's office. She starts to freak out, like, oh my god, like, is he the person who did all of this? She becomes obsessed again. It's great. It's great. If you haven't read it, please read it. It's so good. And the ending was amazing. I was obsessed with the ending. Such a satisfying read. I want to read this again. It is so good. I just was so obsessed with it. And if you have not read this, please get around to reading it. It was amazing, and definitely not just one of the best thrillers that I've read this year, but one of the best thrillers I've ever read. There's actually a couple of those in this stack, so I read some fucking great thrillers this year. The next book that I want to talk about is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. I really liked this. So Riley Sager has surely become one of my favorite thriller, horror, mystery novel authors that I've ever read. He is just like he has a way with like conducting and crafting and building stories up and thrillers, and just like, I love how he writes. I love the method that he uses with all of his thrillers. The Final Girls is the first book that he's published under this name. It was so good. Like, I gave it a 4. I was not obsessed with it, but it was good. Like, it definitely was a good start to me reading his books. Then this one happened, and I was like, holy shit. And I was so afraid to read this because everybody's hyped it up so much, and I thought, oh my god, like, probably not gonna like it. I loved it. There was no need to worry. I was obsessed with it. I read it like at the end of the summer too, which was the perfect time to read it because this takes place in a summer camp. But basically this follows a woman named Emma. It follows a woman named Emma. She was a first-time camper at the summer camp with her friends Vivian, Natalie, and Allison. Basically one night, all 3 of the girls, Vivian, Natalie, and Allison, go missing, and they are never heard of or seen ever again. But Emma was the only camper that lived with them that was alive. People had always kind of thought that maybe she did it, but she actually ended up accusing the owner of the camp's son. So he got all of these horrible accusations, and he had to like go to trial, and yeah, it was crazy, but he ended up apparently not doing it. So then she gets invited back after this camp has been closed for a long time. They decide to reopen it, and she gets invited back to basically be like an art teacher because she's an artist. So they want her to be the art teacher. But then things start to get really weird again. She was wondered if she was asked back because they genuinely wanted her back, or if it was to get some sort of revenge. It was good, you guys. It was so good. Like, so good. Every time, like, I was like, oh, I know who it is. That wasn't it. Or even, like, when I did figure out who it was, and I was kind of disappointed that I did figure it out a little too soon, there was a twist at the end that just, like, knocked me and dragged me. Like, I fucking loved this book. This put me through the ringer of emotions, but I loved it. Read these books. Read Riley Sager books. They're amazing, and I just think that he is so gifted when it comes to writing thrillers. He really, really knows what he's doing. He is perfecting his craft, and every book that I read by him gets better and better and better. Which brings me to my next one, Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. Holy crap, this book was amazing as well. I think I've got a new thing for gothic horror books. I really, really do. This book follows a woman named Jules, and she is really, really down on her luck. She has a really, really hard life. Her parents are dead. She doesn't have any siblings. She's older now and she has a job and a boyfriend, but one day she loses her job and then she goes home to find her boyfriend fucking another woman in their apartment. So she basically moves out of her boyfriend's house, says fuck you, and now she's jobless, doesn't have any money, and she's living on her best friend's couch. So she's really, really desperate for money. So she sees this ad that is basically trying to pay somebody an obscene amount of money to stay in this very luxurious Manhattan apartment building, and it's where all these celebrities and rich people live. She is getting asked to apartment sit for 3 months for somebody. No strings attached, just she has to stay there and watch the apartment, make sure it stays clean, make sure nothing bad happens to it, and she gets paid a ridiculous amount of money. It sounds too good to be true because it is too good to be true, and a lot of weird shit starts happening to her, and it was just a really, really interesting, crazy good book, and I loved it. And the ending I kind of was expecting, but kind of like really didn't expect. Like, there were certain aspects to it that I expected, but then there was other aspects that I had no idea what's gonna happen. It was just an amazing, amazing, amazing book. And yeah, so, and don't read the synopsis when you read this, because there is something in the synopsis to me that is very spoilery, and I am so glad I didn't read the synopsis before I read this, or else I would not have been like as shocked about what happened like on around the 100-page mark if I would have read the synopsis, because it spoils it. Like, what the fuck? But you should definitely read his books. Like, please read his books. They're just so good. I just do not see how anybody couldn't like these books. But if you don't, obviously that's totally fine, but he just really, really knows how to write some thrillers. Like, damn, he knows how to write thrillers. Okay, y'all, the last book that I'm going to read or talk about that is one of my favorite books of 2019. This is not my favorite, but it is definitely one of my favorites, and that is The Silent Patient by Alex Macaladze. Sorry if I'm not saying that right, I'm probably not. This book was really, really good. This is one of my favorite books this year because it was actually different, and I actually really, really didn't expect the ending at all. And there was a lot of people that I've seen that said that they did expect the ending. Well, not a lot, maybe like a couple, and I don't see how they saw it. But then again, like, I don't think I read the book the right way. And I know that sounds weird, but, or maybe the author wanted the reader to read it in this way, because if you read it in a different way, it would have spoiled everything for you. So I'm assuming this does not make sense. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about, but if you haven't, this is not going to make any sense. So I'm just going to shut the fuck up. But basically, I was not expecting this ending. It absolutely blew me away. I was so shocked, and I don't get shocked easily. I actually figure out endings pretty quickly, and it doesn't take a lot of effort sometimes for me, because I just am really, really good at, you know, hypothesizing and coming up with theories about what could happen, and I definitely am good at figuring them out. But this one I did not expect at all. So it's basically about a woman who kills her husband, and then she's in a psychiatric ward and she never talks again. She is completely silent. And then we have this psychiatrist that is new to the mental institution that comes in, and he is determined to get her to talk to find out what happened that night. So this was so good. Like, I was just so obsessed with it, and I read it really, really quickly, and it was just one of those books that I could not put down and that I was so invested in, but holy fuck, it was good. So that's it, you guys. That's my favorite books of this year, and this has been filming for 40 minutes. Holy shit. And I'm about ready to film one more after this, and I just stuck my finger on my fucking nose. So, but that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like it if you did. My dog is barking because of a bath. He hates baths. Tell me some of your favorite books of 2019, and I will see y'all later. Bye.